There is one story in the Bible about two brothers who loved each other, but the interpretation made them enemies. This is the story of Jacob and Esau that begins in the womb of their barren mother. How did it happen that Esau became such a forgotten figure and rejected by his mother even, as Isaac's firstborn, whom he waited 10 years for because Rebekah was barren? His character and looks are suitable to be a king just like David, but it didn't help him and the birthright was stolen from him. During the Babylonian exile, his descendants became persecutors of the Israelites, and thus, his story received a new twist that created the evil Esau and the righteous Jacob. Today we will find out whether Esau was truly evil or whether his interpretation made him so. Let's begin. Esau and Jacob's story begins after Rebekah becomes pregnant after barren years. The babies jostled each other within her. Genesis 25 verse 22. Rebekah goes to seek wisdom from God, and he informs her that she will give birth to twins. Each of them will be the father of a nation, one will be stronger than the other, and one will serve the other. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. Genesis 25 verse 25. Unlike Esau's description, nothing is said about Jacob's appearance. The scripture skips over the brothers' childhood years and goes on to tell us about their character as adults. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Genesis 25 verse 27 to 28. In other words, Esau is an adventurous type while Jacob is a domestic type with a refined character. One day, when Jacob is at home cooking lentil stew, Esau arrives exhausted from a hunting trip. Esau asks Jacob to give him a portion of the red stew to satisfy his hunger. He is a hunter who lives thanks to his skills and cunning, does not attach importance to the small details, and certainly does not plan too far ahead. But he is not a villain. In chapter 27, the elderly and blind Isaac asks to bless his beloved son Esau, but Rebekah persuades her beloved son Jacob to pretend he is Esau himself, and the plan works. Jacob receives the desired blessing. In response to the loss of the blessing, Esau bursts into tears. Due to this deception, Esau declares that he will kill Jacob after his father's death. Despite this, when Jacob returns to the land, Esau comes to meet him with an army of 400 men, but ultimately makes peace with him. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him, he threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. And they wept. Genesis 33 verse 4. While it appears that Jacob's gifts endeared him to Esau, Esau makes it clear that he has no need for gifts and is happy with his share. But Esau said, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Genesis 33 verse 9. Esau is also described as joining Jacob in the burial of their father after his death. On the whole, it is very difficult to see Esau as a villainous character. So why does the Jewish interpretation treat him this way? It has to do with history and typology. The confrontation with the Edomites during the Second Temple period explains the answer. Esau is identified in the Bible as the father of Edom, a nation that bordered Judah to the southeast. During the First Temple period, Edom was sometimes a subject of Israel or Judah, and sometimes it was independent, but it was always on the weak side. However, After the destruction of Judah by the Babylonians in 586 BC, the Edomites took advantage of the opportunity and moved to live in the Negev and the south of the Judean mountains and reached as far north as Hebron. The Edomites took root in their new place, and even when Jews began to return from Babylon and settle in the land again, from 538 BC onwards, the Edomites remained fixed in their place. As a result, Edom received particularly negative references during the Second Temple period. For example, Psalm 137, a chapter that describes itself as a lament for the Babylonian exile, blames the sons of Edom for their joy in the destruction of Judah. Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried, tear it down to its foundations. Psalm 137 verse 7. Other verses in various books prophesied negative prophecies that reflected the change in the historical relationship between Edom and Israel after the destruction of the First Temple. There are many parallels between Isaac's family story and Abraham's story. After many years without children, 2 sons were born to Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac prefers the older son, Esau, just as Abraham shows love for his older son, Ishmael. As well, Rebekah, like Sarah, continues her efforts to ensure that the righteous young son is recognized as Abraham's true heir and the only begotten of the great nation God promised. Chapters 32 to 34 of Genesis describe Jacob and Esau's first meeting after spending decades apart. Jacob sends messengers to Esau to inform him about his return to Israel. These return to Jacob and tell him that Esau is advancing towards him with 400 men. Jacob was horrified upon hearing these words, for fear that Esau would strike him and everything he owned. As a precaution, he divides his camp into 2 so that if one camp is hit, another camp will remain. Set aside part of his flock as an offering to please Esau, thinking that in this way he could atone for the theft of the firstborn, hides his wives, concubines, and children so that they would not be harmed if Esau embarks on a killing spree. After that, the scripture tells about a struggle that Jacob had with some entity, which lasted an entire night, at the end of which he was able to defeat her, and because of the darkness, Jacob could not see her face. This entity was not ready to identify itself and show its face. He was ready to agree to only one request, to give a blessing to Jacob. Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. Genesis 32 verse 29. This passage develops the character of Jacob. When Jacob saw Esau approaching with his 400 men, he prepared for the worst. But Jacob's fear was a false fear. The meeting with Esau was extremely moving. He went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. And they wept. Then Esau looked up and saw the women and children. "Who are these with you?" he asked. Jacob answered, "They are the children God has graciously given your servant." Then the female servants and their children approached and bowed down. Next, Leah and her children came and bowed down. Last of all came Joseph and Rachel, and they too bowed down. Genesis 33 verses 3 to 7. One of the most interesting lines in Esau's words is the one in which he says to Jacob, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Genesis 33 verse 9. Esau tells Jacob, "Even though you have done something that shouldn't have been done, I have reached where I am, without the father's birthright blessing, and I will not take anything from you as compensation." Their meeting came to an end with each going separate ways. Their next meeting was when they buried their father. Isaac was 180 years old when he died, making them both 120 years old. Chapter 35 is entirely devoted to Esau's actions, and verses 6 to 8 are particularly interesting because they state, "Esau took his wives and sons and daughters and all the members of his household, as well as his livestock and all his other animals and all the goods he had acquired in Canaan, and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob. Their possessions were too great for them to remain together, the land where they were staying could not support them both because of their livestock. So Esau settled in the hill country of Seir." Genesis 36 verses 8 to 6. Esau does not try in any way to covet a part of the land of Canaan and heads east. This shows how willing he was to reconcile with Jacob. Therefore, in the book of Deuteronomy, God forbids the Israelites to initiate war against the descendants of Esau. He says to Moses, "Give the people these orders: you are about to pass through the territory of your relatives the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, but be very careful. Do not provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land, not even enough to put your foot on. I have given Esau the hill country of Seir as his own." Deuteronomy 2 verses 4 to 5. Then, later in the book of Deuteronomy, there is another command regarding the sons of Esau, the Edomites. "Do not despise an Edomite, for the Edomites are related to you." Deuteronomy 23 verse 7. Commentators saw these two commandments as a good reward for Esau for honoring his father. And yet he remained Esau, the hunter, the man of the field, unfit for such a covenant as that between God and Jacob, as it required spiritual sacrifice. Esau, the rejected son, was the father of Edom, the biblical enemy of Israel, as we have already mentioned before. This is what led to Esau being seen as a bad character. We hope you learned something new today. If you did, give this video a like and share it with your friends. You can share with us what you know by leaving a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more informative and entertaining content. Thank you so much and see you next time.